Hello, welcome back to the channel. So today I'll be talking about the wide receiver draft class and my top 12 wide receivers that I have seen. Now, some of these, obviously, I might be a little bit higher on than others. I might be a little bit lower than others, but I'll explain why that is. So just kind of going straight into it. Like I said, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. I'll put it up on here on the screen for you just in case you haven't seen the previous two videos where I talk about the quarterbacks, talk about the running backs, now talk about the wide receivers and how I kind of stack up these draft prospects. So let's get into the first one. So at 12 for me is going to be Kobe Hudson from UCF. Now, if you know anything about me, I am an Auburn fan. I saw Kobe Hudson when he was at Auburn too, and I also saw him at UCF as well. I watched a good bit of UCF games, especially watching some of these other prospects too. But something that has been consistently with Kobe Hudson is his route running ability. He has really good, like, not only knowledge of where he needs to go, but and like especially in zone. But as far as like his releases are literally some of the best in the draft. However, everything else about it is just not exactly there. He had really bad drop issues while he was at Auburn and also at UCF, and he's not like the fastest guy. But as far as being a route runner, like I really like his upside. Like I said, he's about like 6'1", 193. I think like if you really want to see a good game and also about another good game from a wide receiver I'm going to talk about a little bit further is the TCU game. So yeah, TCU, Cincinnati were really good games for him, but where he really struggled against was Iowa State and also against Florida, who have had Iowa State of course has a really good corner. We'll talk about him in the defensive draft class. But like I said, his route running ability, I think, and is going to allow him to find a spot where he's probably going to be a wide receiver 3-4 kind of ordeal. But as far as just someone who can get open, that's where I like for Kobe Hudson. And his fits, like I said, I think he could be like for the Rams. He can replace Denard Robinson, who left in that same kind of role. I think the Cowboys, obviously, they need another wide receiver to combat CeeDee Lamb. Right now, it's just Turpin, and I'm trying to think of the other guy. Jalen Tolbert. Like I said, not really anything. I think that Kobe Hudson at least gives them more of a route running ability. But there's some other wide receivers that I also feel like are better fits for the Cowboys. But just something that I've seen that he met with, and I think that could work out for them if they wanted to take a wide receiver later on in the draft. And then the last one is just the Giants. I think obviously you got Malik Neighbors. Darius Slayton is the other main wide receiver. Wando Robinson is kind of there, but he's more of like a tweener, kind of like a he's more so he'd be better suited for like a running back / wide receiver role instead of just a straight up wide receiver role. But I would love to see Kobe Hudson, goodness gracious, in a role in the Giants as far as just using his route running ability. The pick 11, no, pick 11. The 11th best wide receiver that I have, I am very high on him, and I was kind of going in between him and Isaiah Bond. Isaiah Bond, unfortunately, did go out of my top 12. I did really like him, but I'm going to go with somebody that I know I'm a lot higher on than other people, and that's Jimmy Horn Jr. from Colorado. Yes, I know. I've seen a lot of people say like he's probably gonna be like a 6th or 7th round pick. I just feel even though he's very small, he's 5'8", like 174, like very small guy. I get it, but I feel like he's gonna be able to find a role in the NFL because of his play speed. Like, yes, the 40 time was not the fastest, obviously. But if you watch the tape, if you watch Jimmy Horn Jr., not only does he know how to manipulate the defense, especially using his speed, because his play speed is way faster than those underwear Olympics and the NFL Combine. And if you even saw him in like the gauntlet, where turn, catch, and go. Like, he is staying the same exact speed while he's catching it. Some people are slowing down, and because they're trying to make sure they catch the ball, he is staying the same exact speed. He trusts his hands to be coordinated with his feet. And so that's the reason why I trust him. Obviously, like I said, it is going to be a very, very certain role for him because he's so small. But if you want a deep threat, if you want a guy that's going to be able to, like, especially up in the like a seam stretcher, I think as a wide receiver 3, I think he can work out. Some of the good games from him was the Cincinnati game and also the North Dakota State game. Like, that was the North Dakota State was the first game for Colorado. Um, but some really bad games where he was just like not in the game plan at all. Arizona and BYU. I think. Ooh, sorry about that. I think, like, obviously, like I said, his role is very, 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 very small for the NFL. But if somebody wants to make sure they can get him, like, say, late a late third round pick to make sure they get him, especially for his kick return ability in the NFL with this new kickoff rules, I think that's could also push him forward into the third. More than likely, is he probably going to be like a fourth, fifth round pick? Absolutely. But I think there's a chance that he could go third, especially if someone just loves the role that he could play. And to me, if I'm thinking of Jimmy Horn Jr., I'm thinking of somebody that could potentially end up taking Shedeur Sanders. Obviously, they have the connection, but more specifically, the Browns. Let's say the Browns. Okay, well, you got Cedric Tillman. I like Cedric Tillman coming out of Tennessee. Um, he right now he's your Z. You got Jerry Jeudy, who's your X, who's the route runner, but you need that deep threat, and he could be that deep threat for you, especially going into the slot. The Steelers. The Steelers. You have your bookends. You have DK Metcalf. You have George Pickens, and you're hoping that Roman Wilson can be that slot for you. But like last year, didn't really show anything, and obviously you don't want to give up on him because I think they spent like a third round pick on him. I'm not for sure, but at the end of the day, like, Steelers need to start making moves, and especially if they end up taking a Shedeur, there's been a whole talk about there. Like, I think he could really work well in, especially like I said, in the slot as a deep threat. That's something that you don't really have. You kind of have a DK as more a deep threat, but like in a different way. It's a totally different way. And then the last one, like I said, is the Giants. Now the Giants would be more so like kind of tweener. Like, you already kind of got the deep threat um, Darius Slayton. That if you got Jimmy Horn Jr. for the Giants, it would be more so like that would definitely be fourth, fifth round. Like, you're like, oh, I really like this guy, and he could be like a kickoff returner for you as well as being like a wide receiver 4. So that's like pick as a 11th wide receiver for me. Now moving on to 10. And this is going to be a guy that I did not get into until really, really late. As far as, like, I didn't really watch initially that many TCU games, and that's Jack Bech. Like I said, he really shut out in the Senior Bowl, and that's why I was like, okay, let me actually check up with this guy. And that's where I started. I discovered another player that I'll talk about. Where, like, I was like, oh, okay, well, like, this guy's really solid. I forgot he was even at LSU. Just because of all the wide receivers that they've had coming out. But Jack Bech, like, a really, really solid, reliable wide receiver. I think he has, really great hints of he's not like, the level of right wonder that I have with Kobe Hudson, but I think he has some good stuff to his game as far as, like, being able to move in like a pretty big body. Like I said, Jack Bech, he's like 6'1", 214. Like I said, a little bit bigger. Got really, really strong hands as well. I think if you're looking for a guy that's more of like, more of like that Z possession kind of wide receiver, because like I said, everybody has like different skill sets they're looking for in their own offense. So if I'm Jack Bech, I'm looking for a place that already has their number one, just needs a compliment. That's all I need. They just need a compliment that's going to be able to, like, okay, um, being able to move around, but also being able to, like, okay, they need me for this third down and 8, We know that, let's just say, for example, if he went to the Dallas Cowboys, that CeeDee Lamb's probably be doubled because they know that for sure that we're going to try to go to him. You're one-on-one, beat your guy just so we can get the 3rd down 8. I think that Jack Bech can do that. So let's talk about like some of the good games from him was Kansas and also was oh goodness, can't even read my own handwriting. Oh, UCF. That's right. That's right. So UCF, like I said, that's where I grew to love Kobe Hudson even more was because like just watching both of them go back and forth. And then also like some of his bad games though was Arizona and Cincinnati. Those were really bad games. Like I said, I think there are certain times where just like people have bad games. Like I don't want to be like, oh, he was not good. It's more so the fact that um, there. I don't know how the best way to say this. TCU's quarterback wasn't the best either, so it definitely like brings him down and also Zavon Williams down a little bit. But like you kind of like work with what you have. But I think Jack Bech could, especially for like I said, a possession wide receiver, possession Z wide receiver. He's going to go to a team that is going to value some of his other traits. Like I said, his blocking ability, which is not as good as another wide receiver we talk about a little bit later. But Jack Bech, I think, could really fit in like a Charger system. Like I said, somebody who is going to be more of a possession. You already have your yak ability in, well, technically you have yak ability in Johnston, but he's still trying to work through a lot of his stuff. And also you have Lad McConkey, who's obviously like big playmaker out of the slot. If you get your possession wide receiver that is going to be healthy, that's not Mike Williams, I feel like that's a good fit for him at the Chargers. Another one that I kind of like him to go to is, like I already said, with the Cowboys, but also kind of like the Saints. Like obviously he's from Louisiana, Lafayette, Louisiana, I believe. Now the only thing is unfortunately, I don't know how he would feel playing in New Orleans because of the fact that his brother was one of the people who died in the terrorist attack in New Orleans, which is really sad. And like I don't know how like it could be one or two things. It could be like a I'm gonna do this for my brother kind of like feeling of like okay, playing for like home state kind of thing, and but like at the same time almost like that memory too. I don't want to go too deep into that, but like he would fit the Saints. He would fit the Saints, especially what Kellen Moore wants to do, especially because the Saints need wide receiver help. Because like I said, you already have Rashid Shaheed, you already have Chris Olave. If Chris Olave gets injured a lot the last couple of years, so Jack Bech will be able to get that wide receiver, that possession wide receiver that they don't really have right now. But I think that Jack Bech can be like just like a solid option. Like I said, I said before when I was talking about the Browns wide receiver, Cedric Tillman, I liked him coming out. I thought he was a really solid option. I feel the same as that kind of way with Jack Bech. He's a very solid possession wide receiver that is never going to be number one, no, but can be a solid number two option. And I think that's going to be Jack Bech. Now, at number 9, a wide receiver that the reason why I have him above Jack Bech is because in one particular skill set, he is by far the best. Oof, it's gonna be kind of hard to say this, but by far one of, if not the best prospects I've seen in this area of being a wide receiver, technically, and that is blocking. And this is Elic Ayomanor. Goodness gracious, I said that wrong. But from Stanford, dude is like he's not as big as I thought he was. I thought he was a lot bigger. He's still like 6'2", like what 206. Like I said, big frame, but by far the best blocker I've ever seen. Like he knows how to use his hands, he knows how to flip his hips, and especially in certain schemes like your Kyle Shanahan's, like your Sean McVay schemes, they value that a lot. Now, obviously, I think the 49ers, I think the Rams are good at wide receiver now that they have, because they have Puka Nacua, they have Devontae Adams. That could be potential, but that's not. I don't think that's one of the fits that I wrote down for him. No, it's not one of the fits I wrote down for him because I kind of feel like they already have that role filled. But talking about Elic Ayomanor, like I said, Really good games against San Jose State and also against Syracuse. Syracuse is one of those ones where, like, watching Elic Ayomanor, I was also watching another player that I'll talk about in my sleeper picks. And like I said, it really shows out just like his dominant ability. Like I said, he's a really not like I've been talking about his blocking, but he's a really really good possession wide receiver that has some like same as with Jack Bech, has some some route running to his game to be able to position himself where he's able to use his big body, use his physicality to be able to high point the ball, and I feel pretty confident that he can be able to be that, like I said, that big body possession Z wide receiver that can potentially move inside on the slot if you need to use it for block sets. This is where we're going to eventually, after I get done with talking about the bad games, get to where his fits. So some of the fits, some of the bad games that he had was mainly just against Notre Dame. That's the only one that I can really point out. Just be like, that was not good. Obviously, Notre Dame has a really good defense. Like, they were suffocating in general. Stanford didn't have the best year either. But that was really the only bad game that I saw from Elic Ayomanor. I can't say that right. I'm so sorry, Elic. But as far as like his fits, like I said, Sean McVay-esque system, Kyle Shanahan system, like the branches off from that. Let's talk about the fact that he could be able to fit in the 49ers system, especially with Jauan Jennings going to his last year of his contract extension. Now, Jauan Jennings, he's 27 years old. He could definitely get himself another contract extension. However, 49ers need a little bit younger. They're already kind of looking for wide receiver. They already signed. They already drafted Ricky Pearsall last year. Basically, he was the Deebo Samuel replacement. And now you're going to have somebody, well, not the same exact role, but as far as like production. But are they going to try to be able to re-sign Jauan Jennings, who's probably going to get a better payday somewhere else? Or do you go with a rookie that has really good blocking ability that can legitimately fill that role? And I think that that's potential for them to take. I think they have 2 third-round picks, so they could potentially take Ayomanor with one of those. Another one that could, like you said, another place that he can kind of replace a wide receiver 3, and that's going to be the Vikings. Now, the Vikings, like I said, Naylor, he's going into his last year of his contract. He's going to be about 27, 28 as well. You already have your 2 starters, obviously, but if you want to kind of look at McConnell and what he was previously, he had worked with, he was working under Sean McVay. Picked up a lot of those kind of things, working with Puka Nacua. Now, obviously, not Puka Nacua, but work with Cooper Kupp. Now, obviously, that's more of Justin Jefferson's role. But if you want another wide receiver that can do really, really well as far as like blocking wise and free up Justin Jefferson to do some of the other things, I think that's potential for him to be able to replace Jalen Naylor, even though they have different skill sets. I think that Ayomanor would work out in the Vikings. And the last one is kind of something that's not really people talking about is the Falcons. Zach Robinson was at the Rams for a very, very long time, and he did work with Puka. He worked with Cooper Kupp for a very, 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 very long time. So you don't really have that kind of wide receiver in on the roster for the Falcons. Like you got Drake London, you got Ray McLeod, you got Darnell Mooney, but you don't really have that kind of wide receiver that can fit what Zach Robinson has worked with Cooper Kupp. So it'd be very interesting to see. Like I said, I think the Falcons are fine at wide receiver, but if Alex starts falling down, I could see the Falcons potentially looking at, okay, well, we can get a different dynamic in our wide receiver room, and love to see what they can be able to do, because I think that you want to give the best foot forward for Michael Penix Jr., and being able to have a very dynamic offense is what's one of those things to be able to unlock his potential. Moving on to number 8, right? Yes, number 8, a wide receiver that I came on very, very late. I did not watch this player, Kyle Williams from Washington State, until really about probably 3 weeks ago, if I'm going to be honest. Like I said, I just didn't watch that much Washington State. I kind of wrote them off, quasi Pac-12, but not really. Like I said, I just didn't watch him, and like there's unfortunately gonna be some players that I just don't watch. That DJ Giddens is one of them that I've heard really good things about, but I haven't watched him. But Kyle Williams has so much speed. If you want a Z who's going to be like your deep threat kind of Z, Kyle Williams could for sure fit that role. Like I said, came into it really late. Was really surprised, like when I started watching him, I was like, oh, he's not getting talked about as much. And then obviously you had the Chris Sims put him at like I think wide receiver number 2, which then again he also put Brian Thomas Jr. At wide receiver 2. So who knows? But like I said, Kyle Williams I think is a really solid option as far as like being a number 2, being a deep threat number 2. But he has some really good games, like I said, against Syracuse, another one that I watched. And also against New Mexico. New Mexico, I watched them because Auburn also played against New Mexico as well. But like I said, he had a really good game against both those two. Now he did have 2 bad games against Houston and also against Utah. But like Utah usually kind of like causes some people some fits. But like I said, I think overall, if you want a speedy kind of guy, a field stretcher that you don't have on the roster right now, I think that's perfect fit for Kyle Williams. So I think Kyle Williams is going to go a little bit higher than initially I thought. I think he's probably going to go in that like probably like the 45 to 50 range. I think as far as like, we're looking at, potential of like the Jets. I think legitimately, I think him going to the Jets in the second round would be a great fit for him. Not only is he working with Garrett Wilson, but then hopefully Malachi Corley, like, comes to his own as far as a slot guy. So then you have a very, very good young wide receiver core for the Jets that hopefully, Justin Fields can be able to develop, even though he's had a lot of years. But then again, he went from one bad franchise to another bad franchise. So who knows how it's going to work out. But getting a field stretcher for this Jets offense, that would be great for Kyle Williams. Another good fit for him, too, would be the Titans. Like I said, you already have Calvin Ridley. But Calvin Ridley's already 30. He's going to turn. I think he's turning 31 this year. And so you kind of almost have to like look forward to another replacement. But the only one that you really have outside of Calvin Ridley on the roster is you got Traylon Burks and you got Van Jefferson. And Van Jefferson's more of a field stretcher, but like he's not really the best. But you just really need ball players on the Tennessee Titans. Now, I will say there's better fits for Tennessee Titans that I'll talk about a little bit later. But that's one of the teams I could potentially see that Kyle Williams could potentially work out in. And the last one that I can really see him working on it is with the Pats. Like I said, the Pats getting a field stretcher. I'm interested to see like how really and truly how Josh McDaniels is going to want this offense to run. Like I said, the wide receivers are not very good, but then again, it's something that could have been like scheming wise. So I'm like iffy on how the Patriots are going to do their wide receiver room. Obviously, they need to add somebody, but who or what type of wide receiver, I don't know yet. So there's been some people I'm like, I don't know if they want to go to the Patriots or not. But I think Kyle Williams definitely could, just because like um, because of his speed. And then the last of the tier 3, all these have been tier 3. The last of the tier 3 is going to be the first of the 2 Iowa State wide receivers. That's going to be Jaylin Noel. Now, Jalen Noel, I feel like is going to be better suited for the slot. Like I said, he's a little bit smaller, 5'10", 194. Like I said, good build, still a little bit small, but man, is he fast. He has some speed on him. And so, like, I feel like, coming out of the slot, he has, like you said, he has very good quickness. And then, like, in the deep ball speed, I think that he can be able to fit in a role where, okay, we just need you to like stretch the field. That's what we need you from Jaylin Noel. I think he has some other things to his game, but like early on, especially early on in his career, I think that he can just be that field stretcher. Some of his good games that he had was against Kansas. He had actually some really good games. Kansas, UCF, and also Iowa. All 3 of those really good games. Some of the bad ones are unfortunately. Oh wow! I was talking about the worst ones. If you can't tell, like I said, this is like what I'm reading, so like it's kind of hard for me to see. Unfortunately, I did mess up. Wow, Washington and Fresno were the ones for Kyle Williams. Houston and Utah were the ones for Jaylin Noel. like I said, I've been watching, so I have to like write. I'm kind of going on tangent here, but I watched a lot of stuff, so I had to remember what I wrote down, and so now it's all like jumbled together. Sorry about that, but like I said, his good games regardless. Kansas, UCF, and Iowa. Um, all those games he had not only was his counting stats good, but he played a significant role in trying to win those games. Like I said, it came to him and also the other wide receiver we're talking about later. But as far as like Jalen Noel's role, like I said, I think he works really well with the Pats. The same as I think that I kind of talked with Kyle Williams. I don't really know yet exactly what kind of roles these Pats wide receivers are going to be playing, especially in Josh McDaniel's system. But if you want somebody who's going to be a field stretcher, I think that he could work it. He could work in that role, but mainly from the slot instead of being from the Z from Kyle Williams' stance. Um, I think Jalen Noel could also work from the Steelers, kind of same as I think that I talked about with Jimmy Horn Jr., but to a better degree because I think he has better route running than Jimmy Horn Jr. But you have your two, big body, strong wide receivers. You get somebody that can be able to work in the middle of the field. I think Jalen Noel can do that. You can get him later in the draft as well. Probably like closer to like well they don't have their third round pick, so no. I'm trying to remember if they traded the third round pick or the second round pick. Anyways, I think the Steelers could potentially take somebody like him later in the draft. They could be able to fit that role, and also the Bucks. Like I said, the Bucks aren't really mentioned a lot in like a lot of these fits for wide receivers. But like I don't know, I'm thinking Mike Evans getting a little bit up there in age. You re-sign Chris Godwin, but eventually when Chris Godwin's going to have to be the guy because Mike Evans is probably going to retire, you need another guy that's going to be able to pick up where Chris Godwin is going to leave off, and he's going to be like in a different role because obviously age gets to him. Um, but I think Jalen Noel could work really really well in the Bucs system. Um, Now, obviously, you still kind of have to see how the new Bucks offensive coordinator is going to play this. So that's the reason why, like a lot of these new changes that are happening in the NFL is kind of causing you to be like, I don't really know what roles people are going to have just yet until like I really watch and see like what their schemes are going to be depending on the players they have. So that's going to be the end of tier 3. Now, moving on to tier 2, my number 6 wide receiver is going to be Jalen Royals. Now, Jalen Royals is someone that came on a little bit later too as well. Probably closer to 3 months ago was Jalen Royals because I didn't really watch that much Utah State. Like I said, but really great size, like 6', 205. I think obviously him coming off injury is going to cause him to fall a little bit. But if you watch the tape, man, he's a great route runner. Really great route runner, really explosive as well. Like I said, I think he has potential to be an X, but right now I would be more so like, okay, he's a Z, a route runner, route runner Z, and I think he'll do really really well in that role. Like I said, some of the good games you watched is obviously like Boise State and New Mexico. Now, let me caveat this. New Mexico's defense was not good. I just wanted to preface that because I mentioned them. I think this is the second time, but their defense was not very good. But still, he had a really good game against them, and also had a pretty good game against Boise State, which Boise State was a pretty good team last year. Some of the bad ones, though, unfortunately, will be Utah and USC. Now, these were earlier in this season. Obviously, then he ended up getting injured. So there's still like a lot of like looking at last year too. He had a pretty good year. This year could have been a whole lot better, unfortunately, because injury kind of cut it short. But I think the potentially, if you already have your wide receiver number 1, if you want somebody that can be able to move inside and outside, like that a little bit of position flexibility, Jalen Royals can work that for you. So if I'm looking at like his fits to be like the Bills potentially. Like obviously you already have, you already got a Keon Coleman early last year. You just re-signed Khalil Shakir, but outside of them, like I said, you don't really have the other guy. So if you're looking for a Z, if you're hoping that Keon Coleman can be that X, and you're hoping that technically Shakir can be that guy that's moving. If you want somebody that can be able to be like that Curtis Samuel role, I think Jalen Royals can also fit that in that kind of scheme. Now, other than the Bills, I think the Packers could also work him in. However, he reminds me so much more of Jayden Reed that I think they already have that on the roster. So I'm mainly saying that like his role on the Packers will be the same exact role as Jayden Reed. But he, like I said, if you're looking for that type of player, that's the kind of person that I can see him being. Um, and then the last one's gonna be the Pats. Like I said, the Pats need a lot of help, but he would be more so of like, okay, we want more of a wide receiver that's gonna be able to move all around in a different to like be able to create mismatches in the slot or outside as far as like his able to get a nice release. Like I said, I think that Jalen Royals has a lot of potential, but I think starting off, it's better if he's going to be more of a Z that can transition into being the guy like by like year 3 kind of ordeal. Um, Now talking about one of my favorite wide receivers, and honestly, I would put him up a lot higher if I could, but I just can't. I just can't do it just yet. Um, that's the last of the two I would say wide receivers, and that is Jayden Higgins. I absolutely love Jayden Higgins, and it sucks that so many people are now latching on him like, oh, he's really good because now I'm like, okay, now there's no chance for the Panthers to potentially try to get him in the second round because I was like, oh, he's around that range. Maybe we could take him second round. No. More than likely, he's going to go in the first round. And I don't blame anybody for loving him. Like I said, him and I will talk about Donovan Ezeraku later, where I was early crushes about them, and then they've been proven in this offseason to basically just be like risers in the draft. But Jayden Higgins has like not only is he a big body wide receiver who's 6'4", 212, I think, yeah, 214, 6'4", 214, moves really well for how big he is, but is also like really good at the point of attack. Like at the point of attack, it is his ball. And yes, you might look at like some of the stats, but if you watch the game, same thing for Jaylin Noel. Iowa State's quarterback was not good. Was not good at all. Like a lot of those balls were not placed in the right spot. So obviously it's going to be breaking up. It might get intercepted. Like I said, so like I'm not placing that on Jayden Higgins. I'm placing that on the quarterback. But Jayden Higgins, not only is he a very tough player, like as far as like fights for extra yards, but he's got really crisp routes for like how big he is. He just didn't run as much, but like what he did show, he showed that he has a pretty good route tree. It's just for some odd reason, Iowa State kept on sending him on verticals, which is like if you have the quarterback to work that, then that makes a lot more sense. But they didn't. So why were they doing it? I have no idea. But Jayden Higgins is a player that I think that right now, like I said, he is a Z possession wide receiver. Same as like kind of like a lot way better than what I was talking about the Elic Ayomanor, but like as far as being a Z wide receiver that I feel pretty confident that is going to work out in the NFL, and that like in those third down scenarios where like the X is more likely going to be doubled, I can feel confident that he is going to beat his one-on-one matchup. I absolutely love Jayden Higgins. And honestly, if there's a way the Panthers could get him in the second round, I would love so, but he's not. So let's instead talk about some of the good games that he had, some of the bad games he had, and then also the fits. So the good games he had, Utah and Texas Tech. Both those were really great games. Like I said, he was a big proponent for how they won. Now, the bad games is unfortunately going to be UCF and going to be Iowa. Now, as if you mentioned before, one of the good games from Jaylin Noel was Iowa. In the Iowa game, they weren't really going to Jayden Higgins. They were going to Jaylin Noel. And that's where one of the games of Jaylin Noel outshined Jayden Higgins. So I want to kind of make that known in case people didn't pick that up. But I still believe in Jayden Higgins because you could see throughout the season that they were still trying to go to him because he was that guy. And I think he's going to be able to find himself a role whether that be a eventual replacement or being an immediate starter and being an immediate impact player right then and there as soon as he gets drafted. So let's talk about some of the fits. So the fits for Jayden Higgins, I think Commanders, like I said, obviously your top two wide receivers are getting up there in age, are like, I'm pretty sure both of them are close to 29. You got Terry McLaurin and you got Deebo Samuel. Outside of them, you got the McCaffrey kid who's like, he's decent, but like you don't really have any other wide receiver options that I'm like, oh, yeah, I feel pretty confident about that. But if you want somebody that for sure would work out with Jaden Daniels, Jayden Higgins will work out really, really well for him, especially in the kind of scheme that Cliff Kingsbury is going to run for Jayden Higgins. So I would love that fit for him if he falls there. Also, Chargers, like I said, oh my gosh, Jayden Higgins with Lam McConkey would be a deadly combo, and you wouldn't really have to start Mike Williams. He'd be more of a backup, and you would be able to kind of like have Quentin Johnston, goodness gracious, as a wide receiver 3 instead of a wide receiver 2. Because I feel like Quentin Johnston has that yak ability. He has just been struggling to get through a lot of the other things that kind of like constitute him being a good wide receiver. And the last one that I really want Jayden Higgins, I would like him to go to, is to replace the hole that DK Metcalf left in Seattle. I think Seattle, obviously, now JSN is going to be the number one option, but you got to have somebody else. You got Cooper Kupp. He's getting up there in age. You desperately need to make sure you have a backup plan. So if you get Jayden Higgins and you can have especially if Cooper Kupp stays healthy, and you got a starting 3 of JSN, Jayden Higgins, and Cooper Kupp, that is a really good wide receiver, like 3 wide receivers for Sam Darnold to hopefully be able to have a good offensive line in front of them that you can make the best out of it with Clint Kubiak being your offense coordinator. But like I said, love Jayden Higgins. Hope he works out in the NFL. He is the second one in Tier 2. Now, the last one in Tier 2, like I said, still high. Still believe he's going to be like a late first round. He's starting to fall off because of the fact he had a bad year last year, but I still believe in his ability. And that is Mizzou wide receiver Luther Burden III. Now, Luther Burden III had an amazing year last year. Obviously, the team was a lot better too, so that definitely helped. But this year, he was getting double teamed a lot, and he wasn't having the most productive year. But there were still times you saw the Luther Burden of last year in there. And I believe that a lot of teams are going to be like, you know what? We see the capabilities. We see what was happening at Mizzou, just like some of the quarterback play wasn't necessarily the best. Sorry, Brady Cook. And I think that other people were like, you know what? In our system, he's going to work out. But like I said, he's 6 foot, 206. Like I said, I think he's more of like how I believe with Jalen Royals is a Z that could be a slot. I think that Luther Burden is a slot that can also be a Z. I think he should primarily be in the slot. I would love to see him be like, more of like that deep threat kind of player, or like, a player that you're going to be looking at as far as like, deep threat / screens. I love like his vision. He has really, really good vision. So like I said, that's really what I'm looking at, more him being like the slot that can be a Z. But let's talk about some of the good games that he had. Good games, the Boston College game, which another reason why I fell in love with Donovan Ezeraku. I wish I could have seen him a lot more against Armand Mimbu, who I'll talk about later. But that Boston College of Missouri game was fantastic to watch, and Luther Burden was a main proponent of how Mizzou was able to win. And also, like, he also had a really good game against Vandy. Now, Vandy had a really good team this year. Obviously, like, it wasn't necessarily because of their cornerback play, but Luther Burden had a really good game as well, leading them to victory in that game. But when Luther Burden had a bad game, he had a really, really bad game. I remember watching the Bama game. 3 receptions for 3 yards. Like I said, Bama was locking down Mizzou, and they were especially locking down Luther Burden. Like I remember like watching the game. There was a point, I think, in the first half where he had like no catches, nothing. Like it was pretty, or it was like a catch for like negative yards. It was really really bad. Like I said, not it was a bad game overall for Missouri. He had a bad game himself. But the other thing too is Arkansas. Arkansas was not a good game either. I like um, Arkansas was one of those teams that had like up and down kind of season. I talked about like them with the Dylan Sampson breakdown as far as like the running backs. Like I said, Arkansas. I love Travis Williams as an Auburn man, but just could not be consistent to save his life. But they did a really good job of limiting Luther Bird in the third. So there you go. But like I said, that's a good games, bad games. But as far as fits, he's met a lot with the Tennessee Titans, and that would be an amazing fit for him. Like, let's just assume that they're taking Cam Ward. More than likely, they should. So Cam Ward's a wide receiver. You got Calvin Ridley. Obviously, a little up in their age, but it's fine. And then you got, hopefully, you don't really know what's going to happen with Traylon Burks. You don't know what's going to happen with Van Jefferson. But if you got somebody that's like Luther Bird in the third, I feel like you could feel confident you can use him and help both him and Cam Ward progress into the NFL, being together. You know, that rookie connection, especially going to rookie mini camp. I would love if the Tennessee Titans took a wide receiver in the I think they're like pick 35. But Luther Bird in the third would work out really well in Tennessee. I feel like he would, just because like how Brian Callahan will probably use him. Another thing too that I think is like fits is the Broncos. Obviously, like I said, you got your top two wide receivers. You got Cortland Sutton. You got Marvin Mims, who is technically more of the deep threat. But if you want to use Luther Burden more as that intermediary kind of player, then I think that could work out for him as far as like being in that role in Sean Payton's version of what Luther Burden III could be. I think that the Broncos need another weapon. I think it's going to be more so through running back than anything else because their running back room is not like, taking advantage of how good this offensive line is. But if they don't go running back in the first round, I could see that's where Luther Burden could end up getting picked around that Broncos level of like 20, and then coming on down potentially could be taken by say the Steelers. Like same exact way that I talked about before. If you want a really good slot, and I think that Luther Burden III could be a really good slot, or possibly even an eventual replacement for Z, whatever happens to George Pickens. But that would be a crazy combination. There's another wide receiver that I'm thinking that could potentially go to Steelers. But having not only DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and then having Luther Burden III, that is a very, very dangerous a triplet of wide receivers to go to. Now let's move on to Tier 1. Now, like I said, Tier 1 is the wide receivers that I feel pretty confident these players are going to work out well. And I have like a different ranked. I don't have any high tier, I don't have anybody like what I have with Rome. I don't have anybody like Marvin or even with Malik Neighbors. But these three wide receivers in Tier 1, I feel pretty confident in the right role can be able to work and potentially be stars. Not going to be superstars, but be stars in the NFL. Starting off a wide receiver 3, who a lot of people are a lot higher on than I am, and I used to be, especially because of what happened last year. But that's going to be Tet McMillan. Tet McMillan from Arizona is going to be my wide receiver 3, and I used to be really high on him. I really did. But I went back into the film for this year, because last year, absolutely amazing. Beginning of this year, where he had his 300-yard game, I think that a lot of people might have seen that game and be like, okay, that's all I need to know. He's back to where it was from last year. And then they kind of oh, everything else was not his fault. It's just more of Noah Fafita's fault, which granted, some of it is. But the reason why I brought him down, and I don't think he's an X. I think he's a Z. I think he's a Z possession wide receiver with more so of a big body threat. I think that in a better role for him would be more so, okay, he is a yak ability that's more of a big body. Something that a Quentin Johnson unfortunately does not do a good job of, but someone that is in that kind of role. I think that Tet McMillan could be that. But assuming that he is going to be the next Mike Evans, assuming he's going to be the next Drake London or whatnot, I can't see that. Mainly because of the fact of how he is in the beginning of his routes. He just slow plays into it. And like if how I view an X, that is not how I view an X. I view an X as someone like a Devontae Adams, as someone who is going to be like a Stephon Diggs, as someone who is going to be like, be able to get separation early in the route, not just slow play it and get off the ball late and basically just like use your athletic ability just to be able to win. Because in the NFL, you're going to go against really good talent that is not going to be that you're not going to be able to just do whatever you want to do within the first 5 or 6 yards of the route. No, you're not going to be able to do that. Like legitimately, when he went against really good talent, like I said, he had a bad game against Colorado. Who was covering him against Colorado? Who do you think it was? Like I said, like a really good corner like Travis Hunter was not allowing him to do whatever he wanted to do because he's 6'4", 216. I think I wrote this down. 219. He's like 6'4", 219. Like I said, big body wide receiver that I think has yak ability. You're able to see it on tape, absolutely. But I don't think he's next. And I see a lot of people saying that he should be picked at 4 for the Patriots. I just don't see it. I could be wrong. I could be absolutely wrong, and I'll be happy to be wrong. I'm not the kind of person to be prideful, but what I see is not a number 1 wide receiver. A very good wide receiver, no less, but not a number 1. Now let's get into it a little bit more about Tetairoa McMillan. Is his great games, obviously, like I said, New Mexico, another one of those things. New Mexico didn't have a good defense. And also against West Virginia, he had a really good game. But that bad game against Colorado really stuck out. And then I want to mention the Northern Iowa game. So North Iowa was the game right after that 300-yard mark. So he hit 300 yards, 4 touchdowns at the very beginning of the season. And then the very next game was like 2 for like 11 or something like that. Something crazy. I can't remember exactly, but it was just like barely made an impact on the game. Obviously, Arizona wins, so it's not really that big of a deal. But it's just like, almost like this high of a week 1 and then just be brought down to just like, okay, well, I'm not expecting like, another 200-plus game, but just like not even really anything, not even like a 50. But, it is what it is. Like I said, I think Tetairoa McMillan in a good system that already has an X could work out in the NFL. So, obviously, the Packers feel like he's the number 1. So, they've been really, really invested in him. I would be surprised if they take their first ever wide receiver since 2002, when I was 2 years old. The last time they took a wide receiver in the first round. I would be very surprised if that's the play they go with, because you know what? It's in front of the home crowd, so it'll be something kind of cool. But Packers, I could see it work out for them if they feel like, okay, he's going to fit the role that unfortunately we can't get Christian Watson to play because he's so injured. So I could see that in that scenario of like, okay, we want him to play that role. Maybe. Another fit that I feel like really works well for him is someone like the Saints. Like I said, the Saints, they already have their guy with Chris Olave. If you're looking for, somebody that's going to be like kind of what I also said with, I think I said with Jack Bech in the same exact way, where he's more of a possession wide receiver. But as far as like somebody that can be able to be, I'm kind of writing some stuff down that I just remembered. As far as like someone who's going to be a complement to Chris Olave, someone who can be a big body wide receiver for whoever that quarterback is, because no idea what's going to be happening with the Saints. And honestly, all power to them. They finally will be able to reset because they have to. Hopefully, Mickey Loomis, do whatever you got to do, but just don't hurt the Saints more than you have already hurt themselves. But I think he can fit there. And then also, like, legitimately, I think Tetairoa McMillan can work out for the Cowboys. If he's with CeeDee Lamb, where CeeDee Lamb, like I said, the same as I think I say with Jayden Higgins, feeling the same as way with Tetairoa McMillan. If he's in that role, I feel pretty confident that he could work out as far as like being more of a red zone threat, a bigger body wide receiver that the Cowboys do not have. And they don't really have that within their tight end because they lost Dalton Schultz. They haven't really been able to replace that with production. And Tetairoa McMillan will be a good melding of the two needs for the Cowboys offense. Now moving on to my number 2 wide receiver, and that's going to be Emeka Egbuka. Emeka Egbuka, I loved last year. I wish he would have come out last year because I really wanted the Panthers to take him. But he comes back to Ohio State, ends up being the number 2 because Jeremiah Smith is just absolutely outstanding. And he plays his role. He still does an amazing job. And he's still probably going to be a first-round pick. Now, there's some people who think he'd probably fall a little bit further. He could be that kind of like Luther Burden that might be able to fall into like the beginning of the second round. That's fine. But I really do believe that Emeka Egbuka is going to work on the NFL. I feel pretty confident in it because not only is he an absolutely outstanding wide receiver as far as like his route running ability and knowledge of like coverage and like how to sit in coverage, like I said, he is going to be a quarterback's best friend because of that. He doesn't have, the breakaway speed of some other players, but he has really good speed and he has really good like mental awareness. Like I said, he is the definition of a zone beater. I feel pretty confident that if you want somebody that can be able to get a third down, especially working in the slot, I think it's perfect for him. I see him as more of a slot route runner, kind of the same as that way with Luther Burden, where I think he could be a slot that could be a Z, like I said, a movable chess piece, but in a different way. Or Luther Burden more of a deep threat. I think that Emeka Egbuka is more of a route runner that's going to be able to just cook up anybody that he's aligned with. And he's got really good size. Like I said, he's like 6'1", like 202. Like I said, that's really good. That's really good size. And he had some really good games when they desperately needed him. Like I said, both games against Oregon, he had really good games. He also had a really good game against Indiana. And all 3 of those games were highly contested games against top 5 opponents at the time they were playing each other. Like I said, he rises to the occasion. Now, obviously, he had some bad games. I mean, the Michigan stands out because literally that was for everybody. I didn't write that down as one of his bad games, but that was just bad for everybody. And then also there were some games where he didn't take over, more so Jeremiah Smith that took over. Also, Nebraska was another bad game for a lot of Ohio State players. So Nebraska was a bad game, and Northwestern, like I said, one of those games where he's not the one that's really taking over. It's more so a Jeremiah Smith kind of ordeal. But he didn't really necessarily have a bad game. It was just okay, that was more like a Jeremiah Smith just masterclass. Like I said, he is going to be an absolute problem coming 2 years later. He's probably going to be for sure top 3 pick. But Emeka Egbuka, like I said, he fits really well in my opinion. I would love him to go to the Packers. I know they're looking at McMillan, but as far as being a guy that I know for certain that I can go to make sure that he's open, that I can trust, that's Emeka Egbuka. And if you want someone to be, he's never going to be like a Devontae Adams because obviously you can't be. But if you want that same kind of role, I think Emeka Egbuka can fit that in obviously a smaller setting. Never going to be a Devontae Adams, but be that route runner to be able to get open, that Jordan Love can trust, that could eventually become a number 1 wide receiver. I think Emeka Egbuka can fit that. Another one, obviously, is the Texans. Like I said, his connection with C.J. Stroud 2 years ago, he was a sophomore then. Really great year for Emeka Egbuka. Him and Marvin Harrison Jr. working together with C.J. Stroud. I don't think that the Texans will go wide receiver in round 1, but if some of those offensive linemen they've been looking for start, going away, and Emeka starts coming down at 25, I legitimately could see that working out. You got Nico, Emeka Egbuka, and then eventually Tate Dell coming back next year. Hopefully he's back. We don't really know how well he's going to come back, but that would be an outstanding wide receiver room. So Emeka Egbuka to the Texans could potentially be happening. And if I'm Luke McClure, my partner for Gridiron Gurus, I would be jumping for joy. And then the last one that I could see really work out is the Raiders. Obviously, Chip Kelly, offense coordinator, going to the Raiders. You already have Brock Bowers as like basically kind of like your quasi number one. He's a tight end, but like everything runs through him. And then also the fact um, you have Jacoby Myers as your other wide receiver, but he's more of a wide receiver number two. Now, if you want to have Chip Kelly as your offense coordinator, and he believes that Emeka Egbuka can be number one right away, then I would love that. I would love to have Emeka Egbuka. I mean, literally, that would just be crazy. Emeka Egbuka. You have I just said his name, Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, and then potentially, whatever you do with your running back room, I think that would be really, really great for Geno Smith as far as like going to a new team. Now, obviously, they have a lot more holes. The Raiders have a lot of holes, but in the second round, if he starts to fall, I could easily see them try to trade up because Chip Kelly's gonna be like, "Hey, we need to get this guy. This guy's something special. He's a really great leader, a really great ball player. I don't know how you couldn't fall in love with Emeka Egbuka, but he's not my number one wide receiver. My number one wide receiver, and it really helped everything that happened the last half of their season in Texas. That is Matthew Golden, the star player for Texas. On that playoff run that Texas had, Matthew Golden went off. Now, obviously, early in the year, it was more Isaiah Bond, and like I said at the very beginning of the video, I initially had Isaiah Bond as in my top 12, but he started to kind of fall back because of like just some of the other stuff that was kind of coming out, especially like some of the. I'm not going to take the 40 time into consideration, but like there are some things that I still have major concerns for Isaiah Bond. I think he can fit well in the NFL, but as we saw the season progressed, we saw Matthew Golden take on more of the responsibilities, and that Quinn Ewers started to look for Matthew Golden instead of looking for Isaiah Bond. Like, legitimately, the first Georgia game that they had, yes, they ended up losing, but he had a really good game where it was like, okay, like, all right, well, let's see how Texas goes. Like, they had their first true test, but like that Matthew Golden guy is like, okay, let's check and see how that goes. Go into SC championship game. They lose against Georgia, but who also has a really good game? Matthew Golden. Who has a really good game against ASU? Matthew Golden. Like I said, Matthew Golden, like his stretch going into the playoffs, where like he was making back shoulder catches. Some of these throws were not good by Ewers, but Matthew Golden was making them. His speed was electric, and he had really good route running abilities. Like I said, I don't have him at the top. I still have him as a mid tier. I think he's probably going to go in that 11 to say like 20-ish range, probably up to 18. But Matthew Golden, I feel pretty confident is going to do really well in the NFL. And I think that right now he could be an X. I think he'd be beneficial if he was more of a Z. But I think that right now he has potential to immediately as drafted being an X. Out of all the other ones, I feel like everybody else is more of like a slot or a Z. I feel like Matthew Golden is the only one that could right now be an X. So our talk about is good, talk about is bad. Let's talk about what fits would work out for Matthew Golden. If you want to create the worst nightmare for any NFC East team, him going to the Cowboys would be just that. Because not only would you have CeeDee Lamb be as good as he is, but then you have Matthew Golden, who's not only got the speed, but he's also got the route running ability, while also still being able to jump ball, even as 5'9", 191, he was still making good grabs. Legitimately, I could only really see the Eagles matching up well against it because like their secondary they invested, but like that could be a huge difference maker for the Dallas Cowboys. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Dallas Cowboys go with Matthew Golden at pick 12. Next one is the Cardinals. Like I said, obviously, you already took wide receiver first round last year. Marvin Harrison Jr. had some growing pains, but still didn't have a bad season. I think a lot of people are kind of overblowing it. I think because everyone expected him to be immediately good from the start. He should have been rookie of the year, and I still liked him as well. Rookie of the year is a little bit too much for a wide receiver all of a sudden, but like I think that some people had very high expectations. But having Marvin Harrison Jr., more of the possession, more of like, the guy that can get open, and then having Matthew Golden as being the deep threat that can also get open. Like I said, I'm not the biggest I'm not the biggest proponent of like, Michael Wilson. I think Greg Dortch has like a role, but I think that would be a really great receiving core to pair with shoot Trey McBride. Like, then you have no more excuses for Kyler. Like I said, you have all the weapons you could possibly want for Kyler to use with like, really good coaching, with the more investment in the defense to kind of make sure that's not like a shootout. Like I said, I think that would be a really good matchup for him going to the Cardinals as well to pair with Marvin Harrison Jr. The last one as far as a fit is the Packers. Like I said, Packers desperately need a number one option. They think that like they want Tet McMillan. I mentioned Emeka Egbuka, but at the same time, you could probably say like, oh well, Emeka Egbuka is the same exact role as Jayden Reed, whatever your feeling is about Jayden Reed. But Matthew Golden brings something that they do not have. That is a combination of speed and route running. They have speed with Wicks, but he cannot catch to save his life. They got the route running ability with Jayden Reed and Romeo Doubs, but they don't really necessarily have like that breakaway speed. And then you got the big body threat like with Christian Watson, but he just can't stay healthy. More like he's going to be gone. Matthew Golden to the Packers would be deadly. I would love to see him go there. He's probably not going to last that long. I don't know, but man, I feel really confident that Matthew Golden is going to be good in the NFL. So this is like the top 12 wide receivers. Like I said, this is the longest video. The next video will be about the tight ends. Will be a little bit shorter. Like I said, only 6 tight ends that I really watched. But yeah, this is a underrated wide receiver class. I think a lot of people are putting it down, but man, I think the depth, because even the players I didn't mention, I think they could possibly be good as well if they find themselves a role in the NFL. So thank you so much for watching. Like I said, I'm gonna keep trying to pump out a lot of these videos leading up to the NFL draft on the 24th. Like I said, I'll be going through every single position. Also, if you want to watch, how I feel about your draft needs for each team, both Luke and I on Gridiron Gurus on YouTube, we talk about each NFC and each AFC team, their draft needs. We talk about the free agent classes as well, and then we'll also do a mock draft there as well. We'll more likely be streaming the first round on this channel, and then streaming the second and third round on the Gridiron Gurus channel. So just stay in tune for that. And as always, comment however you feel in the comments below. I love to hear the fans either hot takes or their draft ideas or draft concerns about their team in the comments below. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.